2024 was a fantastic year in music, a year in which we got a trap record from Kim Gordon, a country album from Beyonce, and Bring Me the Horizon became some sort of non-binary, digital-only hyperpop entity. Kendrick Lamar showed up on Drake's doorstep like Chris Hansen with NBC Dateline. The Cure put out the best Cure album since the late 80s, and Charli XCX finally got the mainstream attention that she's been threatening to cop ever since we all heard Fancy over a decade ago. Oh, and Chappell Roan and Sabrina Carpenter put in some serious work, getting some respect back on the name of pop music. However, this was 2024. They say you have to take the rough with the smooth, and boy, was there a lot of rough going on around us. Outside of the great music, there's an ongoing cost and living crisis, and in the UK, our politicians are becoming increasingly out of touch, no matter what colour tie they choose to wear. Globally, it was a year in which the world's oldest, fattest toddler got given the keys to the murder factory back because the previous owner is now too octogenarian even for American politics. And Israel went all Hulk Hogan, that is, self-interested public gaslighting and unwavering support from villainous billionaire sex pests. Like lycanthropy under a full moon, the lunacy was evident as the chaos inevitably encouraged some of the worst artists to crawl out from underneath their creep rocks and ruin our days even more. And some good artists have now been seemingly whittled down to husks of their former talents and chose to put out some truly abject material, which certainly helped to rough out all that lovely smooth. Speaking of being whittled down, I'm Dan Whittle, currently going by golden end of year lists pump, and you're watching the Cacophony Sessions. I really enjoyed the music for 2024 and have talked extensively about the albums and songs that I did love in the previous two videos. But what of the records that didn't live up to expectations? Well, truth be told, a lot of the records that failed to meet my expectations were still quite good. Chat Pile, Lemon Twigs, Childish Gambino, to name but a few. So I had to go beyond. I had to listen to a few things that would not normally be on my radar. Some of these things are so off-piste that my radar's not even communicating with me anymore. But still, sweet catharsis, come at me. 2 and a bit months into 2025, with enough space in the rearview mirror to avoid exacerbating any existentialist crises we might be having at the state of the world around us, it's time to stand by for some truly woeful material as we look at the top of the plops for the worst 10 albums of 2024. No dishonorable mentions, no Prince mentions, well, not including that one. No sacred cows, no more delaying, let's go. Number 10. In 2006, Justin Timberlake was at the peak of his powers. With Timberland at his side, Future Sex Love Sounds was the pinnacle of 2000s R&B turned pop with all its futuristic production flourishes, self-confident lyrics, and slick dance routines. 2013's double release of the 2020 Experience albums saw a more refined, mature attempt at a similar sound, working with Timberland once again to achieve similar success, even if it wasn't the cultural tour de force that the previous projects were. 5 years later, we got the god-awful Man of the Woods, in which he began to combine his pop sensibilities with a desire for a Bear Grylls-style side quest to find his authenticity. He failed badly. That album sounded like what would happen if modern SNL tried to do a take on Monty Python's The Lumberjack song. Flash forward then to 2024, and although he ditched the flannel, the record is not all that much better. There are a few reasonable tracks here like Play and My Favorite Drug, buried in the obnoxious and baffling 77-minute runtime. It also includes a full NSYNC reunion called Paradise, which somehow feels throwaway despite potentially being the most newsworthy track on the record. JC's Chazé proving once again that he was the pipes in NSYNC, so it's no wonder Timberlake didn't want a full album with his bandmates, or even to advertise the fact that the track was here all that much. The track is largely forgettable though, just like the majority of the track list. Although Timbaland and Danger and other previous collaborators do return, the world around them has moved on. Justin's position as the heir to Michael Jackson's pop throne came and went a long time ago. Being arrested whilst on tour was probably the most noteworthy thing about this album. Timberlake's Lothario shtick is demonstrative of his lack of ability to read the room and his audience within it anymore. We should have seen this coming. Nobody with a middle name Randall can ever be a sex icon. Anytime he engages on this record with any amount of self-reflection, it's immediately counterbalanced with a reversion to innuendo and quippy boasts about his sexual prowess, all delivered without a hint of irony. It's really not a good look for a man who's just turned 44. Any hint of introspection is quickly buried, and he reverts back to type. A line from the chorus of Infinity Sex implores his partner to pray that this hotel room is insured, and is about as sexy as that time Alan Partridge experimented with chocolate mousse in a Linton Travel Tavern.
Look at the balance.
On the what?
The skirt thing round the side of the bed.
The whole song reads like a child who's just discovered infinity's actually a bigger number than a zillion, and it just so happens to scan with the schoolyard poetry they wrote on the bus on the way to the studio. I mean, there's a functional beat from Calvin Harris, and the bass on the track is pretty good, played by Adam Blackstone. There are other flourishes, such as I mentioned, the track Play. There's a great groove shift from Danger on No Angels, and there are others, but the issue is that for every inspired moment that we get, we also have to endure him chasing ragga and dancehall trends on Liar, and biting off more swamp rock than he ever had a right to be able to chew on Sanctified. There are a few moments of charismatic vocal performances he's capable of, but he really needs to choose better material at this stage in his career. A new sense of direction is clearly needed. Perhaps instead of worrying about bringing sexy back, you should probably just see a chiropractor. Number 9. Throughout the 90s, Ice Cube was one of the fiercest and most outspoken artists in the rising genre of hip-hop. As part of the NWA, and with solo albums like America's Most Wanted, Death Certificate, and Predator, O'Shea Jackson could always be relied upon for scathing attacks on racist structures in the United States, and even against his peers on legendary diss tracks like No Vaseline. However, after 2 decades of Hollywood movie success, Ice Cube's music career has really taken a backseat. It's been 19 years since he dented the Billboard Hot 100, and 21 years since the re-release of You Can Do It got to number 2 in the UK, and he's failed to chart in either country since. This album, with its accidentally suitable title Man Down, tells of a wounded man battling with his own dwindling relevance. On It's My Ego, Cube contests that he was Kendrick before Kendrick, and that statement isn't necessarily untrue. Ice Cube was one of the best to ever do it, and his confrontational, no-holds-barred style certainly influenced the generation of angry social commentators to take up the mantle of MC. However, there's a lack of bite to the tracks here. The production's handled by a number of producers, including the almighty EA Ski, David Banner, T Knotts, and it all lacks the cohesion of previous projects, which were mainly produced by a smaller group, the Bomb Squad handling the majority of production on his debut, for instance. This does mean that the album's massively inconsistent, and for every semi-decent track like It's My Ego, there are multiple dull tracks around it. The biggest issue, however, is the lyrical content. Ice Cube's still trying to be provocative. He's touching on issues like gang violence and the fentanyl epidemic, but his role now is that of an outsider, someone out of touch with the issues affecting young people. He opens the album with a crucial statement: I'm about to slide through, ride through, don't give a fuck what's in my rear view, ain't about to tell you what I've been through, all I want to know is what you're into. This remains a consistent thesis for the record. Ice Cube doesn't really care about the issues facing society anymore. All he wants to do is tear down new artists and remind everyone he actually used to be the cool one. Exhibit, Be Real, Snoop Dogg, Too Short, and other legendary rappers make cameos across the track list, all in aid of Cube's celebration of his old career, really. The problem is that the remaining fire is just misdirected. None of these tracks have any pertinent things to say. A man whose mantra used to be "fuck the police" now seems more concerned that somebody might say he's not the greatest of all time. Heaven forbid. Number 8. The Offspring are one of those bands I always think I like. Smash, Ixnay on the Hombre, Americana, 3 California punk records that I've enjoyed over the years. Even if I think their penchant for a silly single like Pretty Fly for a White Guy or the truly awful original Prankster always held them back as an artistic force, and had they not strived for more mainstream success, they probably could have carved out a more respectable niche within the industry. They do have some good material there, and some of their more radio-friendly hits, like I Want You Bad, demonstrate some really excellent pop song writing skills. I've always maintained a focused album could be quite good. Supercharged, their 11th album, doesn't really contain any silly singles, and it sticks pretty much to a blend of power pop and hard rock. It's magnificently dull. Gone are the relatable, slightly infantile punk trappings and the sunny-sounding, catchy pop-punk numbers. In its place is a sterile, empty shell. Dexter Holland is muted behind a layer of digital polish, leaving him to sound bored and uninspired, very much in keeping with the functional sleepwalking instrumentation. Perhaps that's what happens when you go from studying for a PhD in molecular biology to making a big hair metal adjacent Bob Rock produced record. By the end of this album, I was actually wishing for a joke song just to inject some life into the album. This is actually their first album as a 5-piece with new bassist Todd Morse, and it was bigged up in the media by guitarist Kevin Noodles Wasserman as being representative of both an old school sound and a new era for The Offspring, which is basically interview speak for we had no idea what we were going for. We just turned in a load of songs for the record label. Now, if some of the records on this list will make you straight up angry with their lyrical content, this one won't actually make you mad until a few hours later when you realise you wasted 32 minutes and 20 seconds listening to that shitty Offspring record instead of doing something more productive, like staring at a wall. 7. Truth be told, I struggle to write much about a non-event such as Supercharged. Perhaps then I should have consulted with Post Malone, who's taken the idea of turning a shrug into a few paragraphs and really ran with it, turning a nothing burger of a record to the top of the charts. Even with the semi-successful single in the UK, I Had Some Help with Morgan Wallen. This new album, F1 Trillion, marks Post Malone's shift from trap, R&B and hip-hop sounding material into full-on country. It's been a big year for the renaissance of country music anyway, especially in America. Beyonce made it cool, and a slew of artists all rushed to capitalise on the new vogue. As a man from the island of Great Britain, the only real cultural exposure I've had to country and western is from the few times country artists like Billy Ray Cyrus and Shania Twain found a way to pry the fabric of reality open and caught mass appeal in the UK in the 90s, and that time the cast of Emmerdale Farm copied them. Are we living in worse times? I'm not so sure. Okay, so I've listened to more country in truth. I actually have a huge appreciation for the likes of Bonnie Raitt, Willie Nelson, especially Ray Charles's country and western period. MJ Lenderman, Adrian Lenker put out country-inspired records that I really liked last year. It's not all whiskey and trucks. Someone then should have told that to Post Malone, who appears to have written a country album based off of a 1950s pamphlet written by Foghorn Leghorn. It's as though he looked at the time Garth Brooks grew an ill-advised soul patch, dyed his hair black and pretended he was a Trent Reznor knockoff called Chris Gaines, and then thought, hold my moonshine. Everything that made Post Malone alluring 6 or 7 years ago, the juxtaposition of his melodic crooning with brooding, futuristic beats, is now just replaced with ordinary singing to bad lyrics. Nothing about this speaks about who Post Malone is, or even who he's pretending to be. We're now living in a post-Post Malone relevancy period, and he's been called out as a culture vulture by many online rap critics, who've taken exception to his career as a white man making hip-hop to making southern white music. Now it's fashionable. He is from Texas, and I'm no expert on the culture of either trap or country music, so I'm not going to get too much on my soapbox about it, but I can see from the trite lyrics and pedestrian songwriting that this doesn't really have any artistic merit whatsoever. Even the song titles are painfully lazy. Pour Me a Drink, Hide My Gun, MEX, ICO. It doesn't exactly scream range. It's not that the singing is bad. Malone's got an idiosyncratic voice, and it could work well in any genre, really. He's got an array of established country stars like Tim McGraw, Hank Williams Jr., and even Dolly Parton, and they're certainly helped to create the right sonic spaces here. But from what I understand, even in my position as a tragically British man, country is a genre that very much lives and dies on the artist's ability to write from experience and create relatable tunes, often with mass appeal across blue-collar America. Surely then this is the least country album Post Malone's ever put out. I learned nothing about Post Malone's experiences from this, and I couldn't hum you a single tune other than that one that he did with Morgan Wallen, and that's the most 5 out of 10 song ever recorded. It's actually closer to a Weird Al parody record by my estimations, just without the clever writing. Number 6. Katy Perry's 143 was 2024's musical punch bag, being ranked as the lowest scoring album on Metacritic since 2011, and it featured at the top of a large number of end-of-year worst lists over the last couple of months. Perry's career's been on a downturn since she made Witness in 2018, and that had a very strange marketing campaign where she did her own version of Big Brother and made an enemy of Taylor Swift, which is never a good idea in pop music. Katy Perry has received more backlash for bad pop music now than some actual Nazi tech moguls. I think this speaks more to the brain-broken nature of consumerism than it does about modern music or criticism thereof. There may be gloves in our logo, but I'm not really here to throw any more cheap shots at this record. It's got Doechii on it, so that's one positive thing, but yeah, the songs are Crystal Waters facsimile though. Wow. I admit I went into this album knowing that I wouldn't like it. I do like a few of Katy Perry's older singles, but she's never really been taken seriously by critics. And I never thought this album was going to serve as some kind of Perry Renaissance. You can have that one, Katy, in that regard. I shrugged my shoulders and moved on. But for somebody who seems to have made a career on her personality, she seems so devoid of any character on every single track here that it's actually difficult to write about. It just washes over you, like the faint smell of one of your neighbours boiling their own socks. Sure, you don't want anything to do with those socks, but it's not going to keep you from doing the things you enjoy, like staring at a wall, regretting how much time you've wasted listening to that shitty Offspring album. But of course, the main reason people have taken such an exception to this record is because she chose to have the alleged abuser Dr. Luke work with her once again on production, just as he had done many times in the 2010s, as he was quite a pivotal part of her sound. But come on, Katy. The allegations against him seem credible and very serious. That betrays any ambition of an inspirational feminist message that Katy Perry claimed the record was going for. Before we could even recognise the inanity of the rest of the record, it was such a bad move, especially when she compromised her principles for fucking Woman's World, a song that sounds like an AI-generated jingle for tampons. Actually, Woe Body Form is a rung above this, now that I come to think of it. Number 5. The Great Hip Hop Beef of 2024 was a one-sided battle between Kendrick Lamar and Drake, and it's perhaps the most memorable thing to happen in music over the last 12 months. The catalyst for all of it came from Kendrick's verse on Future and Metro Boomin's track Like That, with the line, "Motherfuck the big three, it's just Big Me," responding to insinuations that the largest three acts in hip-hop are Kendrick, Drake, and J. Cole, whilst Drake would eventually spiral into making increasingly desperate surprise drops just to stay in the same conversation as K-Dot. J. Cole decided to get all his grievances out early in the form of what is really a mixtape, not an album, but it still counts because these are my United States of cack ever. So here comes J. Cole rapping over some mediocre nondescript beats in a technical but uninteresting flow, and I'm like, whatever. Might Delete Later is an even more apt title than Ice Cube's Man Down, as this project was definitely the equivalent of a reactionary drunken shitpost on Facebook after a breakup. He even deleted the last track, 7 Minute Drill, from existence, presumably after a slew of "You okay, hun" DMs in his inbox. I like J. Cole. He's got a good delivery, and he seems to be more self-aware than human 4chan gif Aubrey Graham, but this record did nothing to improve his position at the helm of hip-hop. With bland beats, mediocre flows, and particularly weak writing, on the aforementioned deleted track, J. Cole hits hard by saying that Kendrick Lamar fell off like The Simpsons. Except he hasn't really though, has he? I mean, he just played the Super Bowl. And whilst The Simpsons is a shadow of the show that it used to be, it's fared better than other shows in pop culture like Game of Thrones or How I Met Your Mother, which became pop culture phenomena and then dropped out of everyone's brains entirely by the time they limped to the finish line. It's not exactly the most painful comparison, is it? J. Cole did actually apologise whilst playing live about the whole thing, seemingly embarrassed that he'd even bothered to make it, which is in keeping with his decision to delete the final track as well.
So I'm so proud of that project, except for one part. It's one part of that shit that make me feel like, man, that's the lamest shit I ever did in my fucking life, right?
Pity then that he didn't roll back the transphobic lyrics in Pie. Is you a demon or is that demeanor for the gram? Tell us. They plead the fifth. I'm seeing hints of a trans fella. In cancel culture's vicinity, he's no killer, trust me. Beneath his chosen identity, there's still a pussy, period. With that, it's obvious to see J. Cole has just made the audio equivalent of walking into a pub whilst windmilling your arms, taking shots at everything and everyone, punching down as well as punching up. And that's the best way to make sure nobody stands behind you or your smelly turd of a record. Do better or fuck off and save your apologies for when you're sincere. Number 4. Whilst Man Down and Might Delete Later are actually really good titles for those shitty projects, the next album name couldn't be any more misleading without calling it really good songs. Honest, Timeless by Meghan Trainor is an album that sounds like it was made in 2014 and released in 2014, and that the collective human conscious stopped recording at some point at the end of 2014. Okay, I'll admit I also knew I wasn't gonna like this one going into it. By comparison, Trainor's career makes Katy Perry's Teenage Dream feel like In the Court of the Crimson King. Since All About the Bass came out, she's been remaking the same song over and over again with the same emotionless, electronically neutered doo-wop vocals and early 2010s pop production. Much like Katy Perry, I listened to it and discovered that it's very similar to that album in that it's not written as a treatise on our current socio-economic climate. And similarly to Perry, she spent the last 5 years or so having children, getting married, which means that she no longer writes songs that body shame other women. Instead, she's now exclusively writing songs to empower women by heckling imaginary men. Who does she represent? Well, according to the song Rolling, which sadly isn't a Limp Bizkit cover, it's for the girls out there with opinions. Okay. And Meghan Trainor's now married with 2 children. Who are all these imaginary men that she's fighting off? Why does she think that what they're doing is so good it must be illegal, so call us criminals on the track Criminals? Whereas Perry's lyrics are probably just written by ChatGPT, these lyrics somehow always carry an undercurrent of condescension. What's more, it will feel so surface level and so inauthentic, given what we know about what she's been going through in her personal life. Even her recent announcement on her Instagram page that she got breast implants was less about her own insecurities empowering other women as it was just a shout out for a brand of silicone.
As you know, I'm in a super busy chapter of my life. I've been touring, working, and momming really hard. So recently, I decided to do something just for me. I got a breast lift and augmentation with Motiva implant.
I'm not really here to judge anyone for their looks or their personal choices. So you do you, Meghan. I'll always advocate for that. She is capable of co-creating songs with decent melodies and catchy hooks. Forget How to Love surprised me by how much I actually enjoyed that one tune, slap bang in the middle of the album. It's probably the lone highlight though, and I wouldn't call it much of a highlight. Even the tracks with T-Pain have no personality. Where are the songs about her struggling as a parent or adapting to married life? Nope, it's just more songs about her boom boom and how a man isn't worth much if he doesn't want it, and whoops, you messed up and ran around and then got caught. Whoops, you messed up. Now you're crying about what you lost. I'll give you 5 seconds to guess what that track was called. That's right, Whoops. I don't know if these are the worst song titles in music. That may still be Fall Out Boy, which is a sentence in itself that sounds like a Fall Out Boy song title. Anyway, I wouldn't normally object so hard to something that's so vacuous, but it just feels so consistently mean-spirited in a completely toothless and undirected manner. Even when there's nothing but a chipper mid-2010s funk-like backing tracks accompanying it. There's shots fired at Cupid for hiding away her love on Crowded Room, which I guess gets points for not being called Cupid, but she's always trying to be something she's not, writing about situations that clearly aren't happening in reality, whilst also coming across as really spiteful towards men that don't or shouldn't exist in her newfound family life. It's really odd. This isn't an "it's not all men" reaction here either. Men are shitbags. There's enough horrible real men out there that they certainly don't need to be invented. I'm all for calling out the awful behaviour of people like Dr. Luke within the industry, and I think that muddying the waters with fake misandry really doesn't help a cause that has so many real obstructions placed in its way by the patriarchy anyway. But this really isn't doing anything to challenge that. There's nothing here to aspire to in terms of being a role model for young women. I'm definitely reading too much into it at this point. And I don't know what Meghan Trainor is going through personally, but if there is anything she's struggling with, it really doesn't come out in her writing. Maybe it was all about the bass after all, and she hasn't got any time to write any good music anymore now that all her bass are belong to potty training. Oh, don't get me started on that Lawrence band that features on this album. I'm not even going to listen to their album. Deuce chills. Number 3, Eminem dropped the Dr. Dre produced Houdini back at the end of May, and I knew instantly that this was going to be a rough project to deal with. The album, The Death of Slim Shady Coup de Grace, as the title suggests, is Marshall Mathers' last hurrah with the Slim Shady character. All his dated South Park references and a weird recharging of his vendetta against Christopher Reeve. And that might seem like an odd thing to focus on when introducing this album, but it's essentially what this album is. An excuse for Eminem to complain about things he doesn't like and hasn't liked for 20 years. Christopher Reeve, young people, and modern hip-hop. And the Christopher Reeve thing's weird. It'd be like if I spent this whole review talking about Jeremy Beadle. And fans in the comments who probably think Donald Trump is an economic genius because truth is an alien concept to them. I hear them screaming, yeah, Eminem's actually playing 5D chess. And this album's intentionally showing how Slim Shady is out of place in the 2024 landscape. They'd be partly right too. There is a face turn in the track listing wherein Eminem kills off Slim Shady as a consequence of him being fed up with the asinine rants of his alter ego. However, what Marshall Mathers is forgetting is that making a shit album to prove a point still means you've made a shit album. He should have also realised that the reason Slim Shady doesn't go so hard in 2024 is because Slim Shady was never about speaking truth to power. He cultivated an army of adolescent fans in the 2000s. Hell, I was one of them. I still love tracks like Kill You. I still love The Way I Am. And he did this with his provocative lyrics and self-expression and really not caring what people think. Except now all he does is care about what people think of him. People have realised he doesn't have anything important left to say about culture. So he's made it his mission to try and tear down all the naysayers. Under a Microscope, Guilty Conscience from 1999 was about wild, over-the-top situations, insight into some of his thought processes with a strong sense of humour, but at the same time, it highlighted certain hypocrisies in society of what we do and don't regard as taboo. Guilty Conscience 2, the sequel from this record, is about what if Slim Shady was back 20 years later talking shit about Christopher Reeve, who is the actor that played Superman in the 70s and 80s, was paralysed in a horse riding accident in 1995 and died in 2004, coincidentally at about the same time that Eminem's Creative Spark died. The song is also about taking shots at trans people, and the twist is, it was all a dream. It's just repetitive ideas, an abundance of filler material. It just points out an inspirational drought and seriously lends doubt to the idea that this was his game plan all along. If the songs without Slim Shady on it were not just relegated to the final quarter of the record, we might have a good concept album on our hands. But when it gets to that point, it doesn't even push back against the things that Slim Shady was saying or do anything to imply that the audience were not supposed to be on his side in the first part of the record. Instead, what we have to listen to is essentially Eminem just being a 12-year-old bully on a playground, and then when he gets caught, pretending the bully was just his twin brother all along. Your album's shit, Eminem, even if you're pretending that it's supposed to be. If I make an album called I Might Have Shit in My Hands, and all the tracks are me rapping about how much I enjoy shitting in my hands, but in the last 3 tracks, I actually say, it was chocolate, people are still gonna think I've got shitty hands. To those who don't see how pathetic this record is compared to his past work, and think I'm just an Eminem hater, I say this. Well, my friend, you don't get this review. It's actually a concept review. I'm going to write 3 paragraphs about how laughable this new album is. And then, in the last sentence, I'm going to say, yeah, but he raps really fast, though. And Toby with Big Sean and Baby Tron is a decent bop. So it's actually a 10 out of 10. See? I said it at the end of the review, so it must be true. I pilgrimaged to Jeremy Beadle's tomb in Highgate a few weeks ago. It's not that far from Karl Marx, which makes a lot of thematic sense. It does need cleaning quite badly, but Beatles About was amazing, and his episodes of You've Been Framed really blazed the trail for the likes of Harry Hill to come in afterwards and add pointless voiceover. Nobody ever bested Beadle. He wrote several books. He had Poland Syndrome, and that's all you need to take away from this review of Eminem's Death of Slim Shady, Coup de Grace. Number 2. I'll admit, similarly to the Katy Perry and Meghan Trainor records, I knew that I was going to hate this. Unlike those artists, though, I have a modicum of respect for them as singers, as songwriters, as public figures. I didn't feel the need to listen to those records with a bucket by my side in case of an emetic emergency. Or maybe I just want to waterboard myself back to reality if things got too painful. For those lucky souls that don't know anything about Falling in Reverse or the charisma vacuum that is Ronnie Radke, here's what you need to know. Formerly of terrible metalcore scene band Escape the Fate, Ronnie Radke went to prison in 2009, violating his parole after being found in possession of an illegal offensive weapon. Whilst he was incarcerated, he formed a new band in prison called Falling in Reverse. He has spent every single second of waking life since that moment whining about being cancelled and saying anything to get attention. Racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, all the phobias. From the very opening of this record, Popular Monster, Ronnie Radke claims, "I just want to be a better human." But it's hard when everyone's acting stupid, because of course the first step to redemption is in fact to shift all of your problems onto somebody else. For Falling in Reverse, this is their 5th album, and it includes material dating back to 2019, including a slowdown reimagining of Papa Roach's Last Resort, which makes nu metal feel as transcendent as the invention of electricity. On the track Ronald, of course he named a song after himself. I mean, the man uses his own mugshot for the album's cover. He claimed to pull from the 36 chambers. I mean, I guess it does sound a bit like the Wu-Tang Clan, in the same way that watching this YouTube channel is like watching The Wire. Actually, Method Man was in The Wire, so I guess this video is also pulling from the 36 chambers. This is the first time anyone's ever identified with Ronnie Radke. Sonically, it covers all the ground that you would expect from a project with the apparent mission statement of, what if Vanilla Ice was trapped in a box with 9 Inch Nails The Fragile? He sounds try-hard with his rapping, but doesn't try hard enough with his lyrics. It's the sound of a narcissistic bellend, raging with all his sickly might against all the people that don't like him, whilst scrambling really hard to find people that do like him to feature on the record, who also failed to contribute anything of any merit whatsoever, including the perennially mid Tech 9 on the aforementioned Ronald, the inexplicable Jelly Roll on All My Life, and his thankfully now ex-girlfriend, Soraya Beavis, aka Paige from AEW, formerly with WWE and more known for her wrestling talent, not her musical ability, or indeed her taste in men. She'll be barely heard on Bad Guy anyway, but at least it wasn't a Billie Eilish cover, I guess. She does say that after the breakup they will still be friends, so there is evidence that he is capable of allowing more than 3 or 4 seconds to pass without being a total dickhead. In fact, the track with Jelly Roll is it's so close to being introspective. The chorus states, "All my life I fucked up and I can't deny. I'm doing my best to get it together." Ignoring the horrible production and the awful music in general, he's examining his own thoughts. He still dismisses everything as being down to a stroke of bad luck. From the sounds of it, it was you making those strokes, Ronald. Those very, very inappropriate strokes. So it all just comes across as self-pitying, in servitude of manipulating his audience to feel sorry for him. You're 3 years older than I am, Ronnie Radke. Your audience aren't 12 anymore. Nobody thinks you're cool. This has about as much appeal as travelling to a funeral in a clown car with Fred Durst and the Insane Clown Posse and no Bluetooth connection. I'm not going to bother wasting any more time with this dickhead. I'd advise you to do the same. If this is the first time that you've ever heard of Ronnie Radke, I'm very sorry, and I may well be able to help you with your rehabilitation. So make sure you subscribe, unless it's you watching Ronnie, in which case I really recommend the final winning entry coming up, because it's right up your alley. You'll definitely know who this dickhead is too. Number 1. What else could it be? Kanye West is a Nazi scumbag with the cognitive capacity of a silverfish, and Ty Dolla $ign should just be ashamed of himself. This isn't really music, it's a klaxon for people who can't get any friends because their clothes smell like loneliness. Carnival is one of the worst skips ever put to tape and sent out to public radio, sounding like it was recorded in the bathroom at the local Ku Klux Klan rally with some Italian racist ghouls joining in with the nonsense via FaceTime. Every single lyric to every single song is about how delulu Kanye West has become. It's the story of a fragile ego and a person who's given up on growing, choosing only to listen to sycophants and grifters, whilst transmitting creepy uncle vibes across various social media platforms. He's comfortable with being a stupid, hateful, bitter man, making music for barely conscious people. They all live in this bubble where they're all deluded into thinking they're brilliant purely from the fact that nobody else does, and contrarians get a lot of clicks online. He's the Ricky Gervais of music, a man that made some great material in the 2000s, but failed to understand why anyone ever identified with their creations in the first place, instead spending the last 15 years telling us that they are a genius and shutting down anyone who doesn't agree instead of listening to the criticism and taking it on board. Just as Gervais is convinced that it's actually trans people's fault that the only thing he can now write is the same hack material about how he's actually the best atheist, dog-loving, thin-skinned bully in the world now that comedy's illegal. But it's okay, because the character has a poorly researched and badly portrayed condition. Kanye blames the entire Jewish people for the fact that his production has shown no ambition in 10 years, his lyrics are dumb, and his personal life is crumbling around him because he's just such a wanker to everyone. everyone. Just as in Gervais's head how he thinks everyone thought David Brent was the good guy in The Office, Kanye thinks that his music was just popular due to the fact that he was outspoken, as opposed to the pantheon of nerdy music samples, innovative production techniques, off-kilter, clumsy delivery of provocative yet conscious material. I'm not convinced that Kanye is even a recognizable entity anymore. He's caved to all the hideous influences around him, people like Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes, and he only listens to clout chasers who've been enabling his public meltdown for years just so that they can line their own pockets. If you don't know who any of these people are, by the way, I really envy you. Do not waste your time looking them up. At this point, it's just really tiring to write about Kanye West anymore, and Ty Dolla $ign is just an also-ran artist who featured on some decent tunes a very long time ago. So ultimately, Kanye West is just done. This album is a stinking carcass of a midlife crisis, complete with more objectivization of his wife on the album cover, as seems to be his go-to headline grabber these days since Pornhub broke his brain. He's always been obsessed with treating women like objects. Just look at the new workout plan from College Dropout, for instance. But now it's stripped of any sense of irony or any desire for character growth, and all the killer production is taken away. In its stead, this muddy, murky, busy record, the darkness of which is not so much a purposeful goal in the tone, but rather it's the byproduct of a complete and utter lack of any joy or any soul within these glaringly unfinished instrumentals. As a rapper, he's worse than Ronnie Radke. As a songwriter, Meghan Trainor's running rings around him. Dexter Holland has got a PhD, mate. What have you got? Bad trainers, no friends, a crush on Adolf Hitler, and the same taste in music as Ben Shapiro, who you definitely don't like, although it's definitely not for the same reasons as us sane people over here. So unless the next headline is he's checked into rehab or some kind of mental health clinic, I won't be paying any more attention. And you shouldn't either. Vultures 2 would probably have made this list, but I had more culturally important things to do, like staring at a wall filled with regret about having to listen to an Offspring album, or maybe watching the director's commentary of Tommy Wiseau's The Room while snacking on stinging nettles. Wake up, Mr. West. All the wonderful and fun-loving Cacophants should hit that subscribe button and throw a like at this video. I'll be back with more music discussion. Next up, we're going to the 60s for the next Slammin' 7 video, and there won't be a single mention of rappers trying to fight their own career shadows, out-of-touch pop stars making awful records with awful people for audiences that don't exist anymore. But that can only happen with your support. So let's get a discussion going in the comments. What are your least favourite records of 2024? I'm Dan Whittle, and I'll see you in the next one. Grey Monkey. Whoa, body form for me. Oh, you're still here. Did you know that I have a Patreon? Join for £5 a month and you'll get to suggest a song, an album, an artist, and I will make a short review for you exclusively on the Patreon. Even if you just want to subject me to the pain of listening to something really naff and terrible, I'll give you my all. So sign up now, and together we can stay funky.